What's up, family? Hit the like button, share this video, subscribe to the channel, and let's get into it because I got a story that is gonna blow your mind. It's one of those stories where you sit back and you just watch somebody dig their own grave in real time. And the best part is they don't even see it coming until the dirt is already on top of them. So we're talking about a brewery owner, or a brewery owner, I should say, not opening. A brewery owner in Wisconsin named Kirk Bangstad. Now I did a video a while back about him runs something called Minocqua Brewing Company, right? Now, this man is not just a regular business owner who happens to have different political views than you or me. Now, this man built his entire brand, his entire business model, his entire identity around one thing and one thing only: hating Donald Trump. And I mean, we're talking about hatred that runs so deep. This man was literally waiting for the president to die so he can hand out free beer. Now, don't take my word for it because it was controversy in regards to the matter. And this man, look, I'm not making this up. This man posted on social media promising free beer, right? On social media, promising free beer all day long the day that Trump dies. That's what he said. Told people to save the post, show it when it happens, and it would make good on the promise. Now, then when there was a real assassination attempt on President Trump's life at the White House Correspondents' Dinner back in April, something that could have gotten multiple people killed, something that shook the entire country, this man had the nerve to post, well, we almost got free beer that day, or almost got free beer day. Either a brother or sister in the resistance needs to work on their marksmanship, or he faked another assassination to get positive news cycles. We'll never know regardless. We stand at that ready to pour free beer the day it happens, right? It's on the screen. I'm just reading it word for word, end quote. So let that sink in for a second. We're talking about a grown man, a business owner, somebody who's supposed to be a leader in his community, openly expressing disappointment that a sitting president of the United States was not successfully assassinated. And then he has the audacity to turn around and play victim, running into the Victim Olympics when the consequences show up at his front door. Now, I don't want to break this whole story down from top to bottom because it's a masterclass in what happens when you let your politics consume every single part of who you are. And we're going to look at who this man is, what he did, what happened to him, and then we're going to zoom out and talk about what this actually means for the rest of us because this is bigger than one brewery in Wisconsin. This is a pattern that we're seeing play out across the country, all across the country. And this is the lesson. The lesson in it is something very um, important that every single person needs to understand. I mean, but this is self-explanatory and explaining why the political violence in this day and age is so high, right? So let me tell you about Kirk Bangstad first, so you understand who we're dealing with here. This man is not new to politics. He got recruited back in 2015 by the National Democrats to run for Congress in Wisconsin's seventh district. Now he lost that race. And I mean, he lost it bad, but that did not stop him. He brought Minocqua Brewing Company in 2016, turned it into his political platform, and then ran again in 2020 for the Wisconsin State Assembly against a Republican incumbent named Rob Swearigan. Lost that one too. But here's the part that really tells you everything you need to know about this man's mentality. He openly admitted that the goal was never to win those elections. The goal was to raise money so he could be a loud voice against Republicans. All right. So you got a man, right, who is using a business, a brewery, not to make beer and serve customers, but as a cash funnel for his political activism. He admitted that out loud. And then in 2020, same year, he hangs an oversized Biden Harris sign on his brewery, knowing full well it violates local sign ordinances, right? So that's the sign, right? He did it on purpose, family. He wanted to fight. He wanted the attention. He wanted to be the victim. Then he briefly launched a campaign for Wisconsin governor as a Democrat, but could not even gather enough signatures to get on the ballot. Cannot get on the ballot for governor, so this is a pattern with this man. He is not a serious business owner. He's a political activist who happens to sell beer on the side. And if you are a business owner and you decide that your brand is going to be built on hating half the country, you better be ready for what comes with that. You better understand that when you make your business political, you are inviting political consequences. And you cannot scream about politics all day, every day, and then cry foul when the government that you have been attacking decides to look a little closer at your operation. That is not how life works. That is not how accountability works. And that is exactly what we're about to play out or see play out in real time. Now, here's where the story takes a turn, right? That even I did not see coming. After Bangstad posted those comments that I showed you about the failed assassination attempt, the Secret Service got involved. Think about that for a second. The United States Secret Service opened a federal investigation into this man because of what he posted on Facebook. Now, some people might hear that and say, and think, oh, that is government overreach. That is the deep state coming after a small business owner. But let me ask you a question. If you or I walked into our job tomorrow and told our boss we're throwing a party or something that the day the CEO dies or something, how long do you think that you should keep your job or individuals should keep their job? If you stood up in a crowded room and said, man, I'm really disappointed that shooter missed last week, how fast would security be escorting you out of the building? The answer is immediate. But because this man has the right politics, according to the left, because he's on our team and they want to pretend like this is just free speech and everybody needs to calm down, let me be real clear about something. Free speech means the government cannot throw you in jail for saying something they do not like. Free speech does not mean you get to run a business while hoping the president gets murdered and face zero consequences. Those are two completely different things, and people need to stop pretending they are the same. So the Secret Service investigates, and that federal attention, that federal scrutiny, it opens the door for the state of Wisconsin to start asking questions about this man's business practices. And guess what they found? They found that Bangstad had been shipping untaxed beer into Wisconsin from Illinois through a contract brewer, right? Um, Ironically. So, with that being said, the state had already barred him from direct out of state shipping. So he tried to go around it. He tried to find a loophole. And the Wisconsin Department of Revenue caught him. All right. And they seized about $25,000 worth of canned beer from his tap rooms back in June. And then they issued formal notice revoking his brewer's permit at both of his Minocqua location and his Madison location. Plus, they revoked his alcohol beverage warehouse permit, effective August 4th. Right. So this is August 4th of this year, 2026. Now, Bangstad is fighting it. He filed an appeal so he can keep operating during the process. But here's what I want you to understand. This man is trying to tell the world that he is being silenced for his political views, and he is running around saying the state of Wisconsin is coming after him because he hates Trump. But that is not what happened at all. What happened is the state found violations of alcohol beverage laws, real violations, not made up violations. They found beer that was illegally transported, beer that was not taxed properly, and beer that was being sold in ways that broke the law. And the state is revoking his permit because of those violations. Now, there could there be some political motivation behind how aggressively they pursued it? Maybe. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like politics never plays a role in how aggressively laws get enforced, but here's the thing. If you're going to operate a business that involves alcohol, which is one of the most heavily regulated industries in this country, you better cross every T and dot every I, because the government does not play games when it comes to alcohol taxes. They never have and they never will. And if you're also the guy who is shouting from the rooftops that you want the president dead, which I don't agree with, do not be shocked when the government decides to look at your paperwork a little more carefully. That is not persecution, that is consequences. And there is a massive difference between the two. All right. So I want to zoom out and talk about the bigger picture, because this story is not just about one angry brewery owner in Wisconsin. This is about a pattern that we have been watching out play across the country for the last several years. And the pattern is when you build your brand, your business, your entire public identity over divisive left wing politics, some people would say woke, you are building on a foundation that can collapse at any moment. And more, we are watching those foundations crumble. And I'm just using examples. You can agree or disagree. I'm not telling you what to think or how to think. We're just having a productive conversation. Like I said, I just want to put a disclaimer out there. I do disapprove of his actions. right? You should not wish death on anyone out of respect for human life, and you should also respect whoever president is in office out of respect for the position of presidency. And you should not wish for anyone to die, and I do not agree with any of that, right? But think about what happened with Cracker Barrel, right? As my example on the screen. You remember that Cracker Barrel had a brand that worked perfectly fine for over 50 years. They had that old timer logo, Uncle Harshal, that down home southern aesthetic that people loved. It was comfortable, it was familiar. It reminded people of their grandparents' house and Sunday dinners and road trips to the South. Then the woke CEO, as people would call her woke, quote unquote, I'll just say CEO Julie Massino came in and decided that the brand needed to be modernized. So she stripped away the old timer logo. She sterilized the whole look and feel of the restaurant. She made it more contemporary. Um, contemporary, more like I say, as people were saying, looking at the headlines and people and their perspectives. Most Americans are saying woke, more politically correct. And the backlash was instant. Now, let me know what you think about that and where I'm going with this, right? Customers were furious. Conservative commentators were piling in. President Trump himself got involved. And Cracker Barrel stock cratered nearly 52%. And they panicked, family. They reversed every single change they made. They brought back the mascot. They restored the original brand, and they went back to what worked. And guess what happened next? The stock doubled in a single year. But it was too late for the CEO because she stepped down and she admitted to Glenn Beck that she felt like she got fired by America. And she was right, as most people would say. Now, let me know what that example, family. Do you agree with that? And do you understand in regards to my perspective and where I'm coming and how you can politicize things so far instead of just serving and actually being true to your business and serving the customer, right? So let me know your take on that. I think this is an interesting conversation. But traditionalists, America, mainstream America, the people who actually spend money at Cracker Barrel, they fired her, as they would say. And that is the lesson right there that most Americans would say. You cannot lecture your customers and expect them to keep handing you their money. You cannot insult the people who pay your bills and then act surprised when they decide to take their business somewhere else. And then you look at Hollywood, right? Which I think this is another interesting one, right? Because Hollywood has been an absolute bloodbath for woke, quote unquote, content in 2026. Disney spent over $250 million on a live action Moana remake. I'm not really a fan of the live action Disney movies. I prefer the Lion Kings, the originals, of Disney's and leaving it in that form. But they have this thing of now doing live action remakes. So they opted into a pathetic, quote unquote, most Americans are saying $43 million domestically. One of the worst live action remake debuts in Disney history. Then you got the Mandalorian and the Grogu movie collapsed 70% in its second weekend to the point where it got outgrossed by two low budget indie horror films. That movie is projected to lose well over $100 million. Snow White lost 170 million last year. And what do all these projects have in common? They all try to lecture the audience instead of entertaining them. They all prioritize messaging over storytelling, which was the beauty and is the beauty of Disney and the origins and the foundings of it. And they all thought that if they just checked enough boxes, and some people, as I've seen on the internet, say diversity boxes, quote unquote. I should say boxes, and made enough political statements, the audiences would show up anyway. Basically, the expectation of audiences showing up, whatever they may do. But that's what the free market does, right? But audiences stop showing up, right? Because here's what these people refuse to understand. Regular Americans do not go to the movies to be lectured. They do not buy beer to be told their politics are evil. They do not eat at a restaurant to be educated about their supposed privilege. They go to be entertained, bond, have family time, right? They buy products they trust. That's been the heart and the soul of America in building nothing from something, right? The fabric of this country, the beauty of the United States of America. They support businesses that respect them. And the moment you cross that line from serving your customer to scolding your customer, I should say, serving your customer to scolding them, you have lost the plot. You have forgotten who pays the bills. And the free market, like I mentioned, has a way of reminding you very quickly, right? Just letting that be known. This is Disney. The article losing 170 million with Snow White that I mentioned, the flop. And this is in regards to patriotism that I mentioned. It's no longer a campaign, it's a branding strategy. Consumers define patriotic brands through a wider lens than marketers. Now, this is where I want to bring it back to Kirk Bangstad, right? And the Minocqua Brewing Company. Because I want you to see how this all connects. Bangstad built his entire brewery around being the most progressive brewery in Wisconsin. That's his choice. That was his brand. He was not just selling beer, he was selling a political identity. And for a while that worked because there is a market for that on the left, just like there is a market for conservative branded products on the right, and market for wherever individuals see fit that serves their purpose they feel they can trust in and believe. But here's the difference. When conservative businesses lean into patriotism, right? And traditional values, they are tapping into something that is actually pretty stable. They are tapping into things that most Americans still believe in, like even relationship content, right? That is true patriotism of the traditional family, right? Values being upheld. Sorry for the stutter and speaking fast. I'm literally thinking as I speak at the same time. But you get the point, right? They're tapping into things that most Americans believe: the love of the country, support for the military, faith, family, community, hard work. Those values do not go out of style. And I got to give a round of applause for that because it's the fabrics of this country. It's the beauty, and it's actually a beautiful thing. I always say that family and true family and family that loves you and genuinely loves you and unconditional love is a beautiful thing. It's actually the way of remaining healthy. Family keeps you healthy. Nowadays, we have technology where you have family time and family reunions. You have the current generation, the younger generation, currently locked into their phones half the time and not having actually um, bonding time and actually interacting more face and face, you know, bonding within those traditional values. Touch grass, as we always say, out there touching grass and playing hopscotch and jump rope and tag, all those games growing up, right? So but those vows do not go out of style. They do not depend on who the president is or which party controls Congress. They are the bedrock American values that have been around for over 200 years. And when you build your brand on the left side of the aisle, you are building on something much more unstable because left wing politics is inherently negative a lot of the time, as most people would say. It is based on opposition, it is based on being against things, being against Trump, being against conservatives, being against the system, being against the police, being against capitalism. That's a lot of negative energy. That's all I'm saying. You are entitled to believe what you want, but I'm speaking in regards of understanding the wisdom and the message of what a lot of people are saying because I like to understand where people are coming from. The same way I had to inform myself on where Kirk Bangstad was coming from and why most of Americans, when it comes to this trend, feel the way they do as we're having this conversation. And eventually that negative energy catches up with you, right? Because you cannot sustain a business on hate alone. You cannot keep the lights on by hoping somebody dies. And the moment the political winds shift, the moment your audience gets tired of the constant anger, and the moment the government decides to enforce the rules that you have been breaking, your whole foundation crumbles. And that is exactly what we're watching happen here, unfortunately. Bangstad has a history of skating by the rules. He had a conditional use permit for his Minocqua location that got revoked last year, and he kept operating anyway. Piled up more than a dozen citations. He had $750,000 defamation judgment against him in 2023 for falsely accusing a local newspaper publisher, right? And I want to bring that up. Falsely, right? Not this one. Newspaper publisher of elder abuse and letting his brother bleed to death for an inheritance. He was charged with harassment and found guilty of disorderly conduct in a dispute with the same publisher. This is a pattern, family. This is a man who has spent years believing that the rules do not apply to him because he has the right politics. And now the consequences are landing at the same time. And the thing that makes me shake my head is he still doesn't get it. We all have to live and learn, right? We all can understand and still learn from each other's perspectives, even if we disagree. That's why I'm speaking of from perspectives of we the people, Americans, and their perspective, and Kirk Bangstad perspective. And I'm giving you my input on this objectively as possible, but being productive. And he's still out there telling people that this is about free speech and political persecution. Literally, he's still fundraising off of it, asking people to donate to his legal defense fund so he can sue the Department of Revenue. He is still playing the victim and running into the victim Olympics while the evidence again against him piles up. And that is the part that I want you, family, to really pay attention to. Because this is how a lot of people on the left come to operate, as most Americans would say. They break the rules, they get caught, and then they blame the system. Or just someone in general, right? That loves not to take accountability, right? They never look in the mirror. They never ask themselves if maybe, just maybe, they brought this on themselves. It is always somebody else's fault. There's always a conspiracy. There's always the deep state or the system or the patriarchy or whatever the word they use or are using this week. But at some point, you have to take responsibility for your own choices. And at some point, you have to look at the pile of evidence against you and admit that you made some mistakes. And there's always wisdom in anything, good and bad, in every situation. And you have to want to seek the truth and understand it, and also seek to want to have understanding in all things, because that'll give you foresight, right? In what you should look for, and to continue to do the right thing. Now, I want to talk about the broader cultural shift that is happening in this country, because I think that is really what this story is pointing to. For years, we watched the left dominate the culture. They control Hollywood. They control the news media. As most Americans would say, they control the universities. They control social media. They control the conversation. They use that control to push a narrative that anybody who disagreed with them was a bigot, a racist, a deplorable, a threat to democracy. But something has shifted in the last couple of years, it seems like. And I may be wrong. We're just having a conversation. Let me know in the comments. Something real. And I think what shifted is that regular people got tired. They got tired of being called names. They got tired of being lectured. They got tired of watching their favorite brands and their favorite entertainment turn into political sermons. And they started voting with their wallets. And they started walking away from the brands that insulted them. And they stopped watching the movies that preached at them. And they stopped giving their money to businesses that treated them like enemies. And once that started happening, the dominoes started falling. Cracker Barrel changed course. Disney started losing billions. The news networks that went all in on Trump derangement syndrome, as they would call it. Hatred started bleeding viewers. And now we got a brewery owner in Wisconsin who thought he could build a business on Trump hatred and is watching his permits get pulled one by one. And that is not a coincidence, family. That is correction. The market is correcting itself. The culture is correcting itself. And the people who built their entire existence on being anti-Trump are finding out that anti-Trump is not a sustainable business model. It is not a sustainable identity. We all go through life, through ups and downs and challenges. And we have good times and bad times, good days and bad days. Life is already difficult. Life is already complex. There's only so much hatred any of us can stomach. We're all humans, right? We all want to, we just want to be able to keep things as simple as possible, because life is already complex in itself and can be difficult and challenging. But fighting through it the right way, through love, peace, and unity, and coming together, right? And being productive citizens in your community. And even if you disagree, still finding a way of having that productive conversation to move the envelope forward, to help the next generation, to help communities, so we all continue to thrive, right? And just live this life as we're all trying to figure it out. But it's a not sustainable life to wait to live your life constantly fueling hatred. I mean, everyone wants to love, everyone wants to be loved, and people want to come together, and people go out to enjoy themselves, to go out to a brewery or go, get beer or whatever they do, right? Because eventually the thing you hate goes away or loses relevance or stops being the center of attention. And then what are you left with? You're left with nothing. You're left with an empty building, a revoked permit, and $750,000 defamation judgment, and a bunch of posts that makes you look unhinged to anybody who reads them with fresh eyes. So let me tell you what the real takeaway is from all of this, family. The real takeaway is that actions have consequences. And that sounds simple. That sounds like something you learn in kindergarten. But we live in a time where a lot of people, especially people in positions of influence, have convinced themselves that consequences do not apply to them. They think they can say whatever they want, do whatever they want, break whatever rules they want. And as long as they have the right politics, they will be protected. They will be covered. Their team will circle the wagons and defend them. And sometimes that works for a while. Sometimes you can skate by for years behaving badly because you have the backing of powerful people and powerful institutions. But here's the thing about consequences: they are patient. They do not rush. They wait for the right moment. And the moment your protection runs out, the moment the political wind shift, the moment you make one too many enemies, consequences show up at your door with a stack of paperwork and a deadline. There's nothing you can do to stop them. This is what happening to Kirk Bangstad right now, unfortunately. And I don't wish this on him or anyone, right? It's unfortunate, really. He spent years pushing the boundaries, though. He spent years daring somebody to stop him. He spent years believing that his politics made him untouchable. And now the state of Wisconsin is telling him that his politics do not exempt him from alcohol beverage regulations. The Secret Service is telling him that hoping the president get assassinated is not just a funny joke, it's a federal matter. The courts are telling him that you cannot just make up lies about people and call it activism. And the market is telling him that building a business on hate is a losing strategy in the long run. And there's another layer to this that I want to touch on because I think it matters, and that is the way that the left has co-opted the language of victimhood to shield themselves from accountability. Think about how Bangstad is framing this. He is saying that the state of Wisconsin is trying to silence him. He is saying that a small business is being destroyed by the government over minor violations. He is saying that everyone, Democrat or Republican, should be outraged, and on the surface, that sounds reasonable. It sounds like a guy fighting back against an overreaching government. But then you look at the details, and the picture changes completely. And this is not a guy who made one small mistake and got crushed by the system. This is a guy who has been breaking rules for years. This is a guy who lost his conditional use permit and kept operating anyway. And this is a guy who had $750,000 defamation judgment against him and kept running his mouth. This is a guy who shipped untaxed beer across state lines and got caught. And when the consequences finally arrived, he wrapped himself in the flag of free speech and claimed persecution. And that is the move, fam. That is the playbook. And when you get caught doing something wrong, you do not admit fault, you do not apologize, you do not change your behavior. You claim that you're being targeted because of your beliefs. You make yourself the victim and you hope that enough people buy it before they look too closely at the facts. But here's the problem with that strategy. More and more people are starting to look at the facts. More and more people are starting to realize that just because somebody claims persecution does not mean they're actually being persecuted. Sometimes they are just facing the consequences of their own choices and they don't want to admit it. And that is a life lesson I want you, family, to take away from this story because whether you are a business owner, an employee, a student, a retiree, the principle applies to every area of your life, no matter who you are. You cannot spend your life tearing other people down and then act surprised when your own house starts to crumble. You cannot build your identity around hating somebody and then wonder why you feel empty and angry all the time. And you cannot break the rules over and over and then cry foul when the rules catches up to you. There's a word for that, and the word is accountability. And accountability is something that our society has been running away from a long time now, for a long time. And we have created a culture where everybody is a victim and nobody is responsible, where every bad outcome is somebody else's fault, and where every mistake is actually an act of oppression. And that is a dangerous place to be as a country. Because a country full of people who refuse to take responsibility for their own choices is a country that's going to keep making the same mistakes over and over again. And we are seeing that play out in real time, and we're seeing it in our cities, seeing it in the schools, and we're seeing it in our media, and we're seeing it in the brewery in Wisconsin that promise free beer. And I'm not saying all cities, all schools, right? I'm not saying, everything is bad, all media is bad. I'm just speaking in general to the majority, not the minority. Hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments. Spread that peace, love, and positivity. Let the love supersede the hate, family. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace. Love you guys.